we'll first start with, what was your reaction when you heard about what happened? We can start with you, Susheela.
Yeah, I would describe it as feeling as if someone had just knocked the breath out of me, literally, as if someone was sitting on my chest. As an Asian immigrant woman, my mind immediately went to the sheer terror that those women must have experienced and the panic that their families must have been experiencing and still are. And then sort of the ongoing trauma and fear of knowing that you can be targeted just for who you are, just for what you look like, just for where you came from, that you can be targeted and subjected to violence for those things. You know, I'll add that the one thing that I didn't feel was surprise. This is not new. Violence against Asian Americans and Asian people of Asian descent in the United States, it's not new. It's been going back as far as we've been in the country, through, lynchings of Chinese people in California, through the internment of Japanese people during World War II, through South Asians being killed after 9/11, onto this. And I think it's an undercurrent that we experience all through our lives here that bubbles to the surface when it's given permission by something like an administration, like a pandemic, things like that.
Yeah. What about you, Lori?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I'm processing this. It's unbelievable, but yet I hate to say it, but it's not unexpected, because we had a federal administration that embraced bigotry and fear, and I think that this is the remnants of what you get when you have a president referring to the pandemic as a China virus. It's just, frankly, sickening. And it's terrifying for the Asian community. I have a sister who lives in Atlanta, Georgia. I fear for her safety. Like she knows exactly where these businesses were, where one of them was. And, I worry about her being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the fact that she and I are Korean, that would needlessly draw attention and compromise our safety. That is just a level of fear that, the Asian community is already dealing with, from, being the first to be hit in the pandemic, from, a business and economic standpoint, to the inequities of having, access to shots and vaccines. So it's really, it's very unsettling, and it's hard because as leaders, we want to put on a reassuring, we want people to know that we're there for them. But when something like this personally enters your world, it's hard. And yet, I really want people to know that Commissioner Jayapal and I and our board, we are here for our community.
I can tell that this is emotional and personal for you.
It really is.
Have you felt that kind of sense of fear personally in the last year or throughout your life as an Asian woman?
I mean, I have, but not to this degree. I mean, I think it's the randomness of, as women, we have to be cognizant about, what time of night we do our errands and where we park our cars. But this just brings in such a whole new level of uncertainty that you can't plan for. And how to, I have a 22-year-old daughter. I know Commissioner Jayapal has children too, and even though they're adults, it's like, how do you protect your loved ones? And the reality is you can't, and that it's up to society and our community, that's the only way we can.
What about you, Commissioner? What do you think? Have you felt that this past year more so than throughout your life?
You know, so I've been in the US for 40 years. I came here when I was 16 to go to college. And I've been fortunate that I've never experienced physical violence. But I think what this reminds me is that for some people, I will never belong. I think that's what I felt. That's what I felt during the past year, during you know, the references, as Lori said, the references from the former president to the China virus. That feeling of no matter, I'm an elected leader, you know, I'm an elected leader, and yet as an immigrant, as an Asian, as someone who's identifiably, visibly different, that for some people I will never belong. And as Lori said, my children will also feel as if they never belong, and that they could be subjected to violence because of that lack of belonging. So I think, you know, I think for all of us, it just makes us, it does make us realize our vulnerability. And it also, though, I think for all of us, and I'm sure this is true of Lori, reminds us why we do what we do. We do what we do because we need to serve those folks, the folks like us, like those women in Georgia, like people here in Multnomah County. It's not just Atlanta. You know, this is happening right here in Multnomah County. The district attorney is prosecuting at least 3 bias crimes against Asian Americans right now that have happened since December, so in a really short space of time. So it's happening right here. And we as leaders, we do this because we feel that call to serve communities that are vulnerable, that have been really invisible in many ways. I think Asian American and immigrant communities have been invisible across the country and right here in lots of ways and for lots of reasons. And part of our job is to bring visibility to the violence, to the bias, and to the needs, the ongoing needs of our Asian communities. And I think that's what Multnomah County does, and that's where I turn my efforts, and I know Lori turns her efforts, is thinking about, okay, we've got to make this visible. We have to call it out. We have to be explicit about racism towards Asian communities. And then we have to turn to how do we change that? How do we serve our communities and change this dialogue and this experience? So, you know, whether it's making sure that in the past year that our Asian and immigrant communities have been getting access to testing. This has been an enormous issue in terms of making sure that folks who need COVID testing are able to get it, making sure that they have access to vaccine. There's a way in which the narrative about Asian Americans focuses on the overall data and says, you know, there's a myth that all Asian Americans are successful and wealthy and therefore are not experiencing need. If you look at COVID data, for example, if you look at all Asian Americans, we're experiencing COVID at about the same rates as we are present in the population. But you dig deeper and you look at Vietnamese immigrant communities and Bhutanese communities and Nepalese communities, and you see that they're experiencing it at much higher rates. And so that's what I think our job is to elevate those issues and then to make sure that we're supporting folks with what they need.
Yeah, well said. So it's a crazy intersection right now of what's going on with the pandemic and race and all of this heightened because of it, but also the inequities playing out in access to vaccines and testing. And yeah, I guess from a county level, Lori, I don't know if you have anything you want to piggyback off of that, but you guys had said kind of in your statement that maybe this will renew some sort of initiative to use resources better, or is anything going to change, you think, moving forward on the county level?
Yeah, I mean, I am, you know, with all challenges come opportunities, I believe. And we had the opportunity to distribute $1 million to East County businesses. And those were over 50% were BIPOC and women-owned businesses. So we are really becoming laser focused on reaching out to the communities that have the greatest need. So also we were able to get, excuse me, the Korean community had reached out to me and wanted to know if I could help them find availability for vaccines for Korean seniors. And as Susheela pointed out, is that the Asian community is not one monolithic community. And so, there are different, ethnicities and nationalities within that. So Korean seniors having access to the vaccine is a big deal in their own cultural setting. And there are fears around, medical things and, how our culture, the mainstream culture, delivers services isn't necessarily the best way to deliver services to our community. So, I just think that we are becoming more targeted or more precise in who we can help and really bringing those resources forward.
Yeah, and I appreciate your pointing out, sort of referencing COVID and the way that COVID has elevated disparities. And I think the county has really taken some lessons from that. That it elevated the fact that we didn't have great mechanisms for reaching immigrant and Asian communities, specific ones, that we didn't have in place the mechanisms for getting feedback from those folks. And we've done a wonderful job. Our staff has been amazing about creating those channels. But going forward, we need a structure in place for reaching our communities. And as an example, one of the things that I have requested from the chair's office as we move forward is that we have an analysis of the gaps and the needs in our immigrant communities, very focused, very specific, and then we create the system to be able to respond to that. So I think what Laurie said is spot on, is the work is to be really specific about what people need and how they need to get it and to deliver that. And to continue to learn. I guess the one thing that I would want to say to people so what can everybody do? Learn about our Asian communities, learn about the histories of Asian people in the United States, learn about how diverse we are. I think there are a lot of myths out there, and those myths add to the vulnerability and the possibility of violence. And the more we can learn and dispel those myths, I think the better off we're all going to be.
So well said. That was going to be my next question was, where do we go from here? What can people do? I know talking to Asian American women yesterday, it was like, stand in solidarity, show your support. And Apana posted some very tangible links and ways to donate. So I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that, Laurie, what can people do? Where do we go from here?
Yeah, I think it begins, I'm so grateful to have Commissioner Jayapal on the board with me because, we have a majority minority board, all women. And I think seeing is believing. And when you have voices like ours at the table, it makes a difference. And, I would just say to the API community that we see you, we hear you, we are you. And because we have the privilege of being in a leadership position, we're dedicated to this work. And I would say that, the outpouring, I've been really touched. I've had so many people reach out to me, and that is exactly what we need, is that we need to support one another. And the other thing I would say is that words matter. Words can be weaponized, and we've seen that. But they can also heal people. And, you never know when you might say something kind or supportive and what a difference that might make in someone's life.
Oh, it gave me chills. I hope your sister is able to go about her daily life. I was listening to a podcast yesterday about how Asian women, Asians in general right now, fear even going for a walk. that's heightened for the first time probably in a while.
That's true. I mean, I take my dog for a walk every day in my neighborhood, and um, I carry mace. I I have my cell phone. I'm like, as women, we have to be careful, and now it just adds a whole nother layer to it.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, I did want to point out that we did get a East County vaccination site, so we're definitely making sure
Is that
that.
new?
Well, it's at Gresham High School, and right now I think it's for folks with developmental disabilities. But we're going to be expanding and having more sites in East County. So I just want to make sure. I think, like what Susheela was saying, is that sometimes, as individual commissioners, we advocate for things and we kind of highlight where there are gaps, but there needs to be a more systemic approach. And without us individually advocating, I'm not sure that these things would get accomplished.
You all have a role to play here as well. And I think elevating what we're talking about, elevating the stories of Asian Americans in the United States and our experiences here, that's another huge part of the picture about what needs to happen to create change. So thank you for what you're doing.
This is a hate crime against women. And I don't understand why the media isn't calling it what it is. And so the media has a responsibility. We all do.
And I'll say that I personally think the legal framework needs to change. We can never know what's in someone's heart, and that person probably doesn't know what's in their heart. It's not as if everybody who's biased walks around saying, I am biased and I am acting on my bias. So when you've got Asian women targeted, they're Asian, they're women, they're immigrants, that walks like a duck, talks like a duck, whatever that statement is, I think call it a duck. It is misogynistic and racist, and we don't have to choose between those things. It's misogynistic and racist and anti-immigrant. It's all of those things.
Right. And I would also just like to point out that Susheela and I are both immigrants. And so again, we bring that lived experience to this conversation.
Lori, when did you immigrate here?
Well, I was adopted from Holt. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They started in Cresswell, Oregon, and they really led the way for international adoptions. But anyway, my sister who lives in Georgia, she's also a Holt adoptee too. So, we have a very unique story, or maybe not so unique, because there were thousands of children adopted from Korea. So yeah, so my experience, I came over when I was 6 months old and was adopted to a white family and grew up in a biracial family. And the other thing I would say too is that, so my 22-year-old daughter is like I was thinking at this point in time, she actually looks more like her white father than her Korean mother, and how maybe that will help protect her when I can't.